Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Living an Awakened Life segment of the Awareness Podcast. I'm your host, Susan Telford, and I'm pleased to say that I'm here today with my guest, Amoda Maa. Welcome, Amoda. It's lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, thank you for this invitation, Susan.
So I'd just like to tell you a little bit about Amoda Maa if you're not familiar with her. Her name actually means living a joyous life in Sanskrit, which is lovely. Amoda offers a profound invitation to everyone who wishes to embody the truth of an awakened consciousness in the midst of everyday life. Her life and work is dedicated to supporting this inner transformation and envisioning a new world of peace and enlightened living. Her teachings are free of any ideology, and she's not affiliated with any lineage or tradition. And yet, the luminous truth expressed through Amoda's teachings is the same non-dual understanding that is at the heart of many spiritual traditions, including Advaita Vedanta, Buddhism, in particular the Zen approach, Kashmiri Shaivism, the Tantric path, as well as Christian and Sufi mysticism. Amoda Maa's teachings are expressed in contemporary language and cut through millennia of patriarchal structure, making them relevant and accessible to all people from all backgrounds and all cultures. So again, Amoda, welcome. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I like to begin the podcast by asking you a bit about your own spiritual awakening, what the path was like for you, and anything you would like to share with our audience about that.
It's a long story, so I won't give all the twists and turns. But it essentially, after many years of contemplation, self-help, working on myself, looking within, trying to find out what was the source of unhappiness and at times a deep clinical depression, and trying to fix myself, and very drawn to many esoteric, metaphysical and spiritual paths, eventually leading to meditation of many many kinds, many methods, a lot of body work, a lot of breath work, and so on. I sort of got into a groove of surrender to life. It was really brought together or enhanced by my time in India. I spent some time there, a number of months, but I did visit back and forth for a number of years. And India taught me, or invited me or forced me to surrender to what is. And this was something that I brought back with me to England. It wasn't a conscious path. It was just simply sensing and experiencing directly that when I resisted life, when I resisted feelings, when I was in any argument with how I was feeling, my inner experience or my outer experience, then I was suffering. And when there was surrender, there was a kind of opening and flow and so on. So I lived my life in that way. And during that time, I stopped looking for, I mostly, not completely, but mostly stopped looking for any spiritual experience or transformation. I just simply surrendered to my experience. And it was during that time that unexpectedly there was an awakening out of the identity or the dream state of self-identity. And this was unexpected. It wasn't in meditation. It wasn't through any technique. It wasn't through any process of self-inquiry. It was in the midst of a very, very dark inner landscape. I was very much living on my own and quite solitary, or very solitary. And this enormous sense of abandonment came in, and it wasn't to do with circumstances. I wasn't lonely in terms of my social interaction or that kind of thing. It was an inner sense of abandonment that had really been with me all my life and to do with circumstances. But here it got to like the core of it. It was an existential abandonment. And I noticed how through my life and even in my spiritual journey, there'd be an avoidance of this, some kind of cover up, some kind of turning away from it. And it was really subtle at this point. And in noticing that, which is a kind of mental movement, a mental restlessness, I stopped. I just stopped. And in that stop, I experienced the end of me. It was an energetic experience. I had asked the question.
Was that scary at the time, the end of you? Did that feel scary in that dark landscape?
Well, actually, it didn't really, because just before that, or leading up to that, I don't know, maybe it was a period of a few weeks or something like that. This was over a period of a few months. I had asked the question, what is the nature of suffering? Because I was experiencing this inner landscape. And it was after, 20 years of inner work, 20 years of meditation, 20 years of spiritual, sort of inner looking within, 20 years of therapy and all sorts of modalities. And I'd come to this place of kind of surrender to what is. And that's all that seemed to be required. And then this came. Then this appeared, and it took me by surprise, and it built up over several months. So I asked the question, what is suffering? What is this? Why? What is the root of it? And I wasn't looking for an intellectual understanding. It was a deep call from my inner being, a deep call from the depth of me. And it was in that moment that I kind of, not consciously, but sort of subconsciously said, I'm willing to die for this. Even if it means I'm obliterated or annihilated, I'm willing to die. I'm willing for that, even though I don't know what that is. What does that mean, to be annihilated? Somehow there was something in me that was moving towards that. And so the inquiry was more important than the outcome. So when it appeared and there was a death, in that moment, there's no like, oh, I'm going to die, because obviously the body doesn't die. Yeah, it's a psychological death. But I was willing for the end of something. I didn't know what that was. It was more a surrender to the abyss of not knowing, more a surrender to the abyss of infinite emptiness, an emptiness that was devoid of any sense of myself. No, I don't know. I'm putting words on it afterwards. Yeah, I put words on it description, understanding on it afterwards. In the moment, none of this was really conscious. It just took place. And the miracle was that I ended, and I died, and I was reborn. It was like I merged energetically with the totality of existence, because existence is not empty. It's both empty and full. And I just somehow energetically merged with both. And that was nice. It was like a little blip. I didn't really think anything of it at the time. But then what happened was that going about my life, I noticed that everything was different. Everything. The whole structure of the self. Me, my problems, me trying to fix myself, me, my personality that wasn't good enough, me looking for love because I wasn't enough, me looking for happiness, me suffering because of this or that, me in resistance. The whole thing came undone. That's where the noticing and the understanding of what had taken place sort of started to take place over a number of months again. And it was like the whole structure of me identity, which I, really thought was me, was undone. Now, obviously, there's still, this is still here, this body, and even this personality and this mind. Of course, all of that continues, but a certain dream state just dissolved. The dream state being the many layers and scaffolding of identities. I'm this, I'm that, I'm lucky, I'm unlucky, I'm spiritual, I'm unspiritual, I'm happy, I'm unhappy, I'm loved, I'm unloved. All these identities that had clouded my vision, my perception of reality, just weren't there anymore. It's like the slate was wiped clean. That was radical. That's something that was unexpected and quite something, quite amazing, quite wonderful. And so it has been ever since, although it's been 20 years now. So something has, if you like, settled and become very ordinary. Yeah. So it wasn't a kind of transcendent state. It was just a very clear, state.
And did you have to integrate that? How did you integrate that into a way that you were able to function? Because that does sound very esoteric and transcendental. How did that, or did it? I'm assuming there. Did it require integration? How was it afterwards?
I was totally able to function. I was never able to function any better than that. Yeah. In the sense that all that remained was presence and openness. It was naked. And so reality was perceived without an overlay of, that's colored by our conditioning. It was just as it is. There's no narrative about it. There's no position taking about it. There's nothing to integrate. That was my experience. I do speak about embodiment. And what I mean by that is that this, if you like, it's like being reborn. It's like being a newborn again. Yeah. It's very naked. It's very present. It's very open. And there's a kind of new kind of vulnerability in that. Not a vulnerability of, something bad's going to happen to me or I feel threatened, but just this incredible openness and perhaps sensitivity to what is. That didn't require integration, but it took time for it to be, let's say, the new template for experience. Yeah, as I moved into everyday life, which it was, I was in the city of London. So I wasn't in, on the mountain top or in an ashram. It was an ordinary life. So how was this new experience? How was it being a newborn in the traffic, driving a car, doing the shopping, whatever else was happening? I can't remember. It was so long ago, but just ordinary life. How was it? And that was the embodiment, and perhaps an integration. I think one of the there's two keys here. I think I had done so much work, spiritual, inner, psychological work prior to that it wasn't a mind-blowing experience. It wasn't like I dropped some LSD and it had completely blasted me open.
Yeah.
I'd had so many cosmic, mystical, transcendental experiences. I'd done so much deep meditation of all kind of methodologies. I've done so much energy work and so on that it didn't surprise me in that way. It wasn't like, oh my God, this is something. Yeah, it was radically different, what I call a revolution in consciousness. It was radical, and I was often, amazed by that. But it didn't require any more inner work, which I think can happen if a kind of awakening in this way is very spontaneous and happens before there's any real inner work that's been done. So I think that's one thing. The other thing was that as I went about my everyday life and this new, if you like, experience, whilst occasionally it was like, oh gosh, that's that's new, that's different. Wow. I didn't claim it. I didn't grasp it. I didn't sort of say to myself, oh, I've awakened and it's really special. I just didn't do that. So it kind of naturally filtered into my everyday life. That's what I call the embodiment. There was no fanfare about it. There was no drama about it. There was no elevation, like I'd achieved something to it. I didn't have a teacher at that time. I wasn't part of any group. I wasn't even reading any books at that time. So it wasn't like I could go, oh, yes, I'm enlightened because so-and-so has seen me, or, I didn't have anyone to speak to about it. I just let it just be as it is over a number of years. And I guess that you could say that's a kind of integration or embodiment. But it wasn't dramatic in that sense.
And when did the impulse to teach come? When did you move from this new experience to teacher?
Yeah. It was a good 12 years later. 10 or 12 years later. I think 10, yeah. I had no impulse to go out and speak about it. I had no impulse to tell anyone. I didn't even have words for it at that point. Now, over time, over those 12 years, I did do some writing, and I did tentatively speak at various small groups, but not really from it. I spoke about it, and that didn't work well. And I wasn't a natural public speaker. So I just let that go. I thought, no, this isn't ready. And the only reason I did that is that my background is a writer, and I have been teaching in various ways, in small ways here and there. So it's not like it was a big shift. Yeah, it's not like I was something completely different before that. I've always been either speaking in some way, yeah, academically at first, or working with groups and offering some kind of teaching born of my own experience. So it was a natural flowing into that. You know, it wasn't even a question, oh, I'm going to be a teacher. It wasn't. It was just natural. But it did take 12 years to wait till the true inner impulse came, and without any agenda. And not knowing, I had to sort of almost undo, it sort of undid itself certain layers of the personality self that were extremely uncomfortable with itself in speaking in public, which many people do have that. So I had to just really let it be very ordinary and sort of undo itself on that level. And then I just spoke from silence. I spoke from not knowing. I had no notes, no preparation. And again, this was something very different to how I'd been before. And so it flowed from there. I had no idea that it would be what it is today.
Yes. And you moved from the UK to America. Was that part of it, that move?
It was. And the seed of moving to America had been with me since I was 22 years old. Mm-hmm. So somehow in my 20s, when I was at university studying in London, even then, when I started out doing my research, my PhD thesis, I had this strong sense that I should be or would be in America. And part of that is my work has always been very visionary and very sort of pioneering. And so some of the more rigid structures, even in academia, that were part of the English heritage or British heritage, didn't work for me. I felt limited. And, doing my research and reading scientific journals and magazines about the cutting edge research, it was all happening in the USA, I'm sorry to say. And so part of me yearned for that. Not only that, but at the time I had this real strong feeling that I was very drawn or very resonant with the native cultures. Probably because I'm not actually English by ancestry. So I didn't know what my roots were. And there was something about that really drew me. So I held that seed within myself. Life didn't take me that way. Life was actually very difficult for me for many, many years. And I didn't go to America. And then something started to happen when I started speaking in this way from silence in small groups in England. Circumstances, opportunities, conditions opened a doorway. It was still very unknown, but I jumped. I jumped through that doorway, and it felt absolutely right.
How long ago was that?
That was 2016. Yeah.
So in your bio, I read that you're not affiliated with a particular lineage or tradition, but you teach the non-dual understanding, which is recognizable in various traditions. So tell us about your particular brand of teaching, your particular approach.
Well, let's put it this way. It's never had a brand. It's never had an agenda. It's never had a lineage. It's never had a particular language that I've learnt or, gathered from other non-dual teachings. It has very organically and perhaps slowly evolved by itself. I was not immersed, other than through reading and a few interactions in the world of non-duality. I was not immersed. In fact, I don't think non-duality was really what is it? A theme, a meme in the more public consciousness in 2000 and, well, I think it was 2000, 2001, 2002 when this awakening took place. Maybe it was in the US, it wasn't in London, that's for sure. I simply spoke from my direct experience. And when I came to the US, and small gatherings took place, and I got invited here, there, and everywhere. I spoke from this place, and some of it was very unknown even to me. I found that the words were coming, but it didn't adhere to any non-dual terminology. I just knew that it was non-dual realization because I'd merged with the totality. Yeah, the singularity and the totality were one. So somehow that's beyond me and other. The separation had come to an end. And sometimes I spoke feeling it was clumsy or, not refined enough, or I didn't really know where it was leading, and so on. And just through experience, speaking with more and more people, and having more people ask questions, which was always quite challenging. Yeah, because some of these seekers, especially in the US, were very long time experienced seekers. So there's a language and a tradition and inquiry, and I hadn't been exposed to that. So, it was kind of, whoa, very unknown. But just by listening and speaking and interacting, I understood more and more about the spiritual seekers' conundrums, the sticking points, the mythologies, the obscurations, the challenges, the obstacles, and through my own, long journey. And it just started to form itself more and more and more. And I guess just in the past few years, it's kind of developed naturally, and I don't have anything fixed. Kind of its own language or its own way, which again is unfixed. I have no idea how it's going to be. Yeah. I do speak a lot about openness. I use whatever words come that feel appropriate to the individual when I'm speaking to them. So in that sense, it's very broad and unfixed. And I don't teach any methods as such, but I do listen deeply, and I ask others to listen deeply to themselves. And so there's a kind of interaction that happens, of deep listening, and the invitation to be open, or to know openness in the midst of everything, the whole human. So I very much include the human experience, because that's often been negated or overlooked in spiritual circles. Not so much these days, but very, often it still is.
Yeah, that reminds me, actually, I've been reading your book, one of your books. I know you have others. This one is called Falling Open in a World Falling Apart. And what you just said there reminded me of the sentence in the little bio on the back of that book, which says that your teaching features a timeless truth that is highly relevant to this moment for contemporary seekers willing to go to the raw edge where spirituality meets humanity. So talk more about that. One of the things I really like to do in podcasts is to give the listeners and the viewers, if we can, a direct experience of your teaching. And often how that happens is via an interaction with me, as someone who would be coming to you to speak to you as a teacher and to discuss. If I said to you, I'm really interested in this, where spirituality meets humanity. How can my spirituality not exclude my humanity? How do I embody that in my life?
Then I would ask you, what is it about your humanity that you might feel or think is getting in the way of spirituality? What does spirituality mean to you? Yeah.
So an answer that I might say is in the area of my body, for example. It's very common to read spiritual teachings or to hear sentences such as, I'm not a body, and for that to almost lead to a rejection or an overlooking of the body, and a view that to be spiritual is to be unconcerned with this human form.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, very common. And that's the danger of spiritual teachings that we read or hear, especially non-dual teachings that constantly point to the recognition or to the knowing that I am not the body, or there's nobody here, and such things. Again, this would be a sort of ongoing inquiry, but we'd start with, first of all, putting aside all non-dual teachings, putting aside, if possible, everything that you've read, everything that you have taken on as an idea. Yeah. And discovering for yourself that, yes, is it true? Is it true that you are having a bodily experience?
Yes, that's true.
It's your direct reality. Yeah? Anything else to negate that or to deny that is insanity, no? Yeah, it would be insane to say, I am not having a bodily experience. Because obviously you are, as am I. Yeah. So there's a fact, there's direct reality. And then, and we're kind of sort of almost running ahead here, but, and then the realization that you are not limited to this body, and you are not, your identity, let's put it this way, your identity is not limited to this body. And there's the exploration, because in the unconscious state or the egoic state, the state of ego identity, which is just the default position, we identify almost totally unconsciously with the body. And so whatever experience we're having, we're either rejecting it because we don't like it, or we're craving it, holding on to it because we do like it. And then we believe ourselves to be that sensory experience. Yeah? I believe myself to be that which I feel, that which I touch, that which I sense, that which I see. Yeah. And then we see through that veil, which is always duality. I like, I don't like, I crave, yeah, grasp, or I reject, I resist, based on my sensorial or bodily perceptual experience. And so identity is lost in that. When identity is freed from that, yeah, in other words, we discover who we are or what we are, yeah, which is a whole untangling that goes on. Yeah. Then we're free from the identity as a finite body, a limited body, trapped in perceptions, yeah, sensorial perceptions. But we're still having a bodily experience. And we can take care of that so that it functions well and serves that which has been recognized as awake. We can call that love, we can call that awareness, we can call that freedom, or we can call it whatever. Yeah, it serves that. So there's nothing to deny. In the same way that you would take care of a baby, you would take care of a small creature that needed care. We tend to what needs, or a flower that's growing, we tend to what needs to be tended to. But just because I'm tending to the flower doesn't mean I am the flower. Well, I am the flower on a deeper level, yes. But it's not limited by that. Yeah. So there's a natural intelligence that takes place. Yeah. There's much more inside that we could explore, but we have to really untangle this idea that if my true identity is not the body, or I'm not limited to this finite experience, which is finite because you're born and you die. If I'm not limited to that, or I am not just that, or I'm not identified, my identity isn't completely, enmeshed with that, that doesn't mean that we have to deny it. That's insanity. That's not intelligent. We don't deny it, but neither do we remain completely identified with that.
Yeah. And an extension of that too is the concept that the world is an illusion.
Yes.
So in the same way, speak about that.
Yes. I mean, again, that idea, or that even recognition, because on one level we can see that the world is an illusion. Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. Well, we can talk about that. But that when it becomes hijacked, yeah, as a absolute truth by the mind that doesn't really know true nature, might have had a glimpse of it, then it becomes an erroneous belief, or a misleading belief, yeah, which can also create nihilism, meaninglessness, lack of care, isolation, and so on and so on. Again, that's not very intelligent. Yes, it's not life's intelligence that is informing that. When that's pointed to occasionally, the world is an illusion, or perhaps there's a kind of seeing of that, what it really means is that the world, when it's not talking about the world as its physical experience, its physical reality, although it can be taken to that extreme. It's the world that we think we're seeing, the world of our beliefs, the world of the beliefs and constructs that we've imposed upon it. Yeah, because we never, unless there's true awakeness, we don't see the world as it is. We see it as we believe it to be. And that world is an illusion, because it's a world of thought, belief, projection, and so on. My understanding of the deeper meaning of the world is an illusion is that and it gets tricky here, but mostly the investment we have in fighting against the world, in making a wrong right, in rejecting the world, in being broken or hurt by the world, that relationship to the world, that's illusory. And that when we truly understand that, then we can meet the world being our direct experience, not the world we think of that's informed by social media or the news or other people's opinions or cultural opinion or collective opinion. Not that world, but the world that we meet through our direct experience, which can only be here and now. Yeah, the footstep on the snow, the smell of the winter air, and whatever else, the bird lying with a broken wing. That world we can meet without an overlay of our belief systems. It just is what it is. And the natural intelligence informs us to take care of the bird with a broken wing, or to whatever it might be. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So you are going to be coming to us in June to teach a couple of masterclasses. The title is Unconditional Openness, the Way of Freedom. So you said before that you speak a lot about openness. So tell us what you mean by openness, and a little bit about what you'll be bringing to us in June.
I've discovered through my own direct experience and the living of that, and in speaking with many people, that speaking about openness is more valuable than speaking about awakening. Awakening conjures up all sorts of ideas of, some state, all of that, and what we need to do to get there, and all sorts of things. Of course, I do speak about awakening, but openness is our fundamental nature. That's what the discovery is in awakening, in enlightenment. Yeah, the discovery of freedom, the liberation of self-identity from a limited self, this body, this mind, this story, this history, the self-liberation out of that is the discovery of open awareness, open beingness. We can call it many things, as our fundamental nature. When we discover that or recognize that, and that can be recognized as an ongoing recognition, not waiting for that one moment where it's a big aha, but an ongoing recognition of that which is already open, then we start to discover freedom. And that's awakening. That awakening can be very gradual. That awakening is in the midst of life itself. It's not a spiritual practice. Yeah, that's where the two come together. And so openness isn't something that we need to do. Yeah, it's not about, oh, I'm really open to this situation, but I'm really closed from that one. It's much deeper than that. It's about the discovery of what is already open, because there's nothing that can change that. Yeah? I'm really pointing to our true nature as infinite, unbounded beingness. I could use the word awareness as well. That which is always aware presence. It's always here. When we look behind our experience, our rejection, our, whatever feeling we have about our experience, when we look behind that, our thoughts, when we look behind that, come closer and closer and closer to that which is already here, in the innermost, in the quiet, in the depth. We discover that nothing has ever changed there. It's always been here. It's always been aware. Otherwise, how could you even remember your experience? How could you even have an experience if there's no awareness having the experience? We can call that presence. It's always open. It doesn't close. It can't shut itself off. It's like the sky. It's unbounded. It's always there, whether there's storm, whether there's clouds, whether there's rain, whether there's shine, whether there's tornado. It's always here. The weather is called my life. The sky is called my true nature. So it's coming to that recognition. And yes, that can be sort of intellectual understanding, but to recognize it in the midst of life starts to change something from the inside out. Yeah. And that's what I'm really wanting to offer a little taste of that, or glimpse of that, or at least the invitation in this masterclass. Again, I don't provide really methods, because that's not the way. I provide pointers, pointers and inquiry through dialogue.
Yeah. So if people come and join us, then they will have an opportunity to directly interact with you and to have a dialogue with you.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
And so there are two classes, and one's on the 5th of June, and that one's called Recognizing Your Natural State as Openness. And then the second one is on the 19th of June, and that one's called Abiding as Openness in All Circumstances. Because it can feel sometimes more challenging to remain open when all is chaotic around us.
Yeah. I mean, the key in all this is really about softening the tight fist of resistance. That's how openness starts to be recognized. So rather than looking for openness, we can become sensitive to the resistance to what is. And almost everybody, well, in fact, everybody I speak to recognizes that. They know when there's this tightness, this resistance. It might be in this area of life, or in this relationship, or it might be just there always, but they notice it, they know it. And everybody that comes to this inquiry is seeking freedom from that, because that's the root cause of suffering. So the openness that is being spoken of is discovered when we have the willingness to soften in the midst of what is. the end of resistance. Yeah. Now there's a big how to, but yeah, it's not really a how to, it's a willingness. Yeah. Most people eventually are willing, because the unwillingness just creates more suffering. This is called surrender. This is the path of surrender, and the doorway, the direct doorway to freedom. That's why you can forget about awakening and enlightenment. You're not really forgetting about it, but we're not really focusing on that as a state to achieve. This is the awakening. This is the undoing of the ego self. The ego is always in resistance. When there's no resistance, then the ego starts to undo itself.
Willingness is the key.
Yes. And I think perhaps what I offer, or what is offered through this teaching, is an ongoing, direct, ruthlessly loving, or lovingly ruthless invitation to that willingness. And that's where the inquiry is. And that's where the inclusion of the human experience is. Where in your life are you unwilling? Where in your life have you given your allegiance to the resistance? And where or when or are you willing to stop? And we just unpack that. So it's really an invitation rather than providing any technique.
Yes. Thank you. So just in closing, you're coming to do these 2 masterclasses in June, but if people want to find your ongoing work, what do you offer? Bearing in mind this podcast will be broadcast in May. How can people work with you, really, is the question.
Well, there's a ongoing array, if you like, of online programs, some of which will have taken place by May, especially the sort of foundation, which is a 4-month program where we meet every week. But there's others, and they'll be ongoing. And that's the primary work. We meet weekly for a certain number of weeks. We have a loose theme, and then we go deep into the inquiry. And there's something about meeting over and over again. So that goes on throughout the year. I offer private sessions, a limited number of private sessions per month. And hopefully some in-person events later this year. But I highly recommend the online programs because they're very intimate, they're very direct. We don't have to meet in person for that. And there's people from all over the world. And it's very one-to-one. Yeah, we have plenty of opportunity for that. And that's where a lot of the sort of groundwork is done.
Yes. I think that's one of the blessings of the pandemic, actually, was the recognition that so much good work can be done via Zoom.
Yes, yes.
Is there anything else that you would like to say as we bring this conversation to an end?
Oh, it's been wonderful speaking with you. Yeah, lovely, gentle interaction. And touching on some good key points there. Yeah, lovely.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for listening.